Whatever corporations once were, they've since morphed into atrocious vampires, bleeding us dry of every dime they can and making our lives as miserable as they can get away with. The solution to this has historically been more regulation, but I actually have an entirely different proposal. First, a little setup. Corporate law was created in a completely different environment than that in which corporations operate today. Back in like the 1850s or whatever, when it was individuals buying stock in a railroad, the laws were designed to protect investors from the corporation. Well, that's not the world we live in anymore. A railroad accident in the 1850s would have harmed some people, but as we know from Too Big to Fail, an economic accident on Wall Street can destroy us all. So the law hasn't updated itself to say you have moved from being private actors with limited reach to being de facto public systems. Corporations transact hundreds of billions of dollars. They're directly in our lives. They have our data. Wall Street is statistically almost entirely comprised of corporations feeding corporations, which is why there's such a detachment between Wall Street and Main Street. Humans are subject to something called the panopticon effect. You might be familiar with this. They did studies where they put eyeballs on a computer monitor, and just having fake eyeballs changed the behavior of people because they felt they were being watched. What the panopticon effect really points out is the way humanity evolved is to be aware of ourselves in public and to kind of button up our behavior. What the law has done is remove the panopticon effect from the people behind the corporate shield. It's removed the psychology of being watched. And so the law I'm proposing is simply saying you have to act like you're in public. Effectively, the law covers two things. No more diffusion of responsibility. It says somebody's responsible, and if nobody named is responsible, it's the CEO and the board who are de facto personally liable for the behavior of the corporation. And it says that the standard of behavior is a standard set by a reasonable average person. What I'm proposing is really just for either large corporations or ones that transact huge amounts of money. This isn't a government telling you what to do. This is a government saying, you figure out what to do. It's on you to assign both power and liability to the officers within your corporation. It's on you to save all of your data, because if you wind up in court, the failure to save that data is going to be held against you. You can see how every corporate officer who's assigned both liability and power within the corporation would absolutely act in their own behalf. I mean, to use a hypothetical example, so pretend that you're working at a rideshare company and you're the named officer who's responsible for rideshare decisions like, we're going to jack the price if we notice someone's phone battery is running out, which is something apparently some rideshare companies are thinking of doing. Well, you would then have to ask yourself, do I think a reasonable person would think that's okay? Because if your answer is no, and you wind up in court, you're the one who's going to lose all of your money because you allowed your corporation to act unreasonably. That's what the vagueness of the law does, is it forces people to act conservatively because out of fear of violating the reasonableness standard, they act more than reasonable. And isn't that all we want out of our corporations? What it's saying is there is someone responsible for corporate behavior. The buck is starting with someone and stopping with someone. And between those two someones, everyone involved is going to be held liable. So my proposal is not to tell them how to behave, but rather subject them to a law that enforces the panopticon effect, whether they like it or not. Companies will kick and scream and say that prices are going to go up if they do this. But of course, that's only because they're predators and they forget the other option is for them to make less. How am I going to make money in a way that's acceptable to the society I'm making money from? You'll notice this isn't a regulatory regime. It's a self-regulatory regime, but with teeth. The only reason we have a regulatory nanny state is because corporations behave like selfish babies, and you now need to behave like civilized adults in society. Most of the regulatory regime could conceivably vanish, which is ostensibly what those in power want. But of course, what those in power actually want is for the regulatory regime to vanish and be replaced with nothing. In my version of it, if you're, say, a deli meat company, we don't really need laws saying you can't sell poisoned meat to people. All we need to say is someone in there is going to be responsible for setting up a system that sold poisoned meat to people. And from that person all the way up the chain, they're going to lose all of their money. All of a sudden, you don't need regulations. You just need the actual humans behind the corporation to have consequences for their behavior. And the determination of what's acceptable behavior in the public sphere is not for the corporation to decide. It's for us to decide. And since the people behind the corporate veil are the exact same human beings we are, if we can figure it out, they can figure it out. We don't need a whole pile of laws to solve the horrific behaviors corporations enact on us. All we need to say is you need to do what the rest of us do in public. Watch yourself.
What is this?